All right. So today we're going to continue with the speaking section, but we're going to start a new task. So remember that we have seen task 2 yesterday, which was about the campus announcement. And now we're going to be looking at task 3. Now, from now on, things are going to be a bit different since it's no longer going to be as casual as the other ones. So task 3 and 4, the last two that you have in the speaking, are both academic tasks, which means that you may have some new words, some new expressions, new vocabulary, because it's obviously going to be on academic topics. But it's still not going to be that complicated. The good thing is that we do know what topics you may find, so you can check out some vocabulary always. And yes. So here's what you need to do here. First, you will be asked to read a short text, something like this, and you will be given 50 seconds to do it. So you will read this text for 50 seconds. It's a short article on a concept, and then you will have to listen to a lecture. So I don't know if you guys remember what a lecture is, but it's basically a college class. So it's it's a college professor explaining the same topic that you read about, and you will have like a deeper explanation on the topic in the lecture. And then finally, you get the question, which is asking you to summarize everything. You're gonna get 30 seconds to prepare and then 1 minute to speak. The same way we did for task 2. Okay, so once again, you read a text for 50 seconds, you read the article, then you listen to the lecture, then you get the question, 30 seconds to prepare, and 1 minute to speak. So is that okay so far? Any questions? All right. Now here are the topics that you guys may find. So chances are you will have one of these 3 topics. It's either going to be psychology, biology, or on business. Now, it's really rare that you have something outside those 3 options, but it has happened. So maybe 10% of the times you can have something like art or history, literature, sociology, what have you, but you're more likely going to find one of these 3. So psychology, biology, or business. Now, psychology, I would say, is the easiest one because of the vocabulary they use, I would say. It's usually on how our mind works, how our brain works, how we interact with each other, how we process experiences, memories, pain, emotions, how we learn, that kind of thing. Then biology, it's always about animals or plants and how they are organized, how their life processes are, the relationships, how they adapt. That's something that I've personally seen a lot. So maybe how certain animals adapt to climate change, or how they find food, or how they avoid predators, that kind of thing. Usually animals or plants, you don't have human biology. And then business, which is also, I would say, the language is quite simple to understand, especially if you have some vocabulary. So business is probably going to be on marketing techniques, advertising techniques, strategies, that kind of thing. It's nothing that complicated, not big economy. So is that okay, you guys? Any questions about that before we move on? Ecology, biology, or business? All right then. So now let's take a look at what you actually need to do. So first thing, as I was saying, you will read this article for 50 seconds. And as you can see, you have a title, and then you have the text. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is make sure that you read the title and that you take notes on that as quickly as possible. Because the title is something that's not just a summary like it was in task 2 or anything. This is a key term, okay? It's the concept, the main topic, and it's something that you guys have to mention in your response. So you have to mention behavior modification. So you better take notes on that, because it's gonna be there. And then you have to read this text, which is gonna be a short introduction to this topic, to this concept. Now, I wanna be real clear on this. The only thing that you guys need to focus on when you're doing this, the only thing that you care about, that you wanna find, is the definition of this concept. So you need to find what behavior modification is, or whatever the title and the concept is. Okay, that's the only thing that you wanna do here. You're gonna have some more details, sometimes examples, whatever it is that you could have. But the only thing that you really care about is finding the definition, because that's the only thing you guys are gonna use, right? So we're gonna try and read this and find that definition. So can anyone please read? Is there anybody who would like to read?
Yes, I can read.
Okay, thank you.
Individuals often modify their behavior based on what they have learned about the possible consequences of their actions. When an individual learns through experience that a certain behavior results in pleasant consequences, that behavior is likely to be repeated. An unpleasant consequence, on the other hand, discourages further repetition of the behavior. While behavior modification can be observed in experiments, it also occurs frequently in everyday settings. When individuals change their behavior based on what they have learned about the consequences of that behavior.
All right, thank you so much. So what do you all say? Can anyone define behavior modification? What is?
Maybe that humans modify their behavior based on the consequences.
Okay, perfect. So how humans modify their behavior based on the consequences of that. Perfect. So if we wanted to choose something, maybe we could choose that phrase. So behavior modification occurs when individuals change their behavior based on blah, blah, blah. Or it's also the beginning, you know? So perfect, that's behavior modification. Now, the definition is always gonna be there. It could be at the beginning, the middle, at the end. Sometimes you have some red flags. So for instance, here you have something like, this discomfort is known as cognitive dissonance. So it's known as, is described as, or is called, or I don't know. So whenever you have something like that, pay attention, it's probably gonna be like that. So try to find the definition. That's the only thing that matters. And believe me that getting that right is gonna make it a lot easier for you to understand then the lecture. So you're gonna know exactly what you're looking for if you got the definition right. If you have something else, then it might be harder for you to understand how it's related. You'll see. So any questions about this, about the reading part, what you need to do when you read? Okay. Now, next, you will be listening to this lecture, as I was saying, you know, where a professor is explaining a bit more this topic. Now, what you will have in the lecture is basically real-world examples of this. So how you see this in real life, how you see it in action, when it happens in an experiment, it could be in anything, but how you see it in real life. So a real-world example of this topic. Now, according to the topic that you get, you may have one or two examples. So if you have a psychology topic, for example, you're always going to have just one example. If you have a biology topic, on the other hand, you have two. And if you have business, then you can have one or two. It depends. Now, to be more specific, when you have a biology topic and you have one example, it's always going to be one of these three options. So it's either going to be a story from the professor's own experience, so something that the professor did himself or something that he saw in a friend. Maybe when he was a kid, he used to do this, he used to modify his behavior. Maybe he has a friend that did this. So it could be a personal story. It could also be a more general example. So for example, how kids do this, or how teenagers do it, or how business people do it, or how you see this in, I don't know, in business maybe, or in negotiations, whatever. Or something that I've seen too is experiments. So maybe you have this illustrated with an experiment. So you put two groups of people, one of them is going to modify their behavior based on the consequences, whatever. So that's when you have one example in a psychology topic. When you have biology, it's always going to be two animals or two plants. So if you have something like revealing coloration, then you're going to have the examples of two animals that do that. So two animals that reveal their colors, or if it's camouflage, maybe two animals that have that ability. Okay. And if it's business, that's a bit more unpredictable. It could be maybe two strategies, or maybe it could be, I don't know, the example of a company that's trying to sell something. It depends. All right, so any questions about that? Psychology is one example, biology is two, and business is one or two. Okay, any questions? All right, so now we're listening to the lecture, and you guys need to look for that example. This is a biology topic, it's about behavior, so you guys will have just one. Now, as I was saying, when you have the definition, it gets a lot easier to understand the example. So you're looking for certain individuals. I don't know who that's going to be, whether it's going to be the professor himself, a friend, his dad, maybe business people. I don't know. You need a certain behavior, whatever you want, and then you need the consequences of that. So you're looking for those elements in the lecture. All right, we're going to see. So let me show you. Okay, so now I'm gonna play it for you. Make sure to take some notes. Here it goes.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic in a psychology class. This happens all the time with kids in schools. Girl who's just starting school. Well, they're not really used to the rules about proper behavior for a classroom. So at the beginning, I don't know, interrupt the teacher, walk around the classroom when they're supposed to be sitting down. You know, just misbehave in general. Okay, but what happens? Well, the teacher gets angry with them when they act this way. They might get punished. They have to sit at their desks when everyone else is allowed to go outside and play. And they certainly don't like that. Soon, they'll learn that this kind of behavior gets them in trouble. They'll also learn that when they raise their hand to talk to the teacher and sit quietly and pay attention during class, they're rewarded. The teacher tells them she's proud of them and maybe puts little happy face stickers on their homework. Now that their behavior gets a good reaction from the teacher, the kids learn to always act this way in class and not behave the way they used to. Using the example from the lecture, explain what behavior modification is and how it works.
All right, so that was the lecture. And actually here I have a transcript. So, okay, so can anybody tell me what it was about? What was it about? Anyone?
The professor gives an example about it,
Okay, about
about the behavior in ties, I think, in a classroom.
okay, exactly. So the behavior or how they do this, how kids do this in schools. Okay, so in what's the example about? What happens? How do they modify their behavior? Were you guys able to identify any maybe cause-effect relationships or a sequence of events? Sometimes you have that when you have a psychology topic. It's usually a story or cause-effect. It's experiments. It's also like a sequence. So anything like that in here? Yes, Araceli?
Okay, I heard about when kids interrupt the teacher. The teacher like punish them to sit in their desks and not let them to play with the other kids. And when they, for example, do a positive thing like raise their hands, the teacher smile or say that he or she is proud of them, and that action the kid probably will repeat in the future.
Okay, perfect, Araceli. Thank you so much. That's great. That's exactly what it is. So, okay. So first thing we know that at the beginning here, we have a sequence of events. First they enter the class, they misbehave because they don't know how to behave yet, and as a result, they get punished. So that's the first thing. Now, on the other hand, when they behave well, they raise their hand and stuff, they get rewarded or they get a happy face sticker, whatever. And finally, as a result or thus, they learn how to behave. So that's the action that they're going to repeat because based on the consequences, based on how the teacher reacts, they're going to tend to behave in the way that leads them to a positive reaction. So now that their behavior gets a positive or a good reaction from the teacher, they learn to act this way in class. So that's it. So what I would say here, when you're explaining this in your response, you only have 60 seconds, which is, I would say, enough. It's just enough. But the safest strategy would be to maybe avoid getting too much into detail. So you want to really focus on what's important, and that is how kids modify their behavior based on the consequences of it. That's the important part. Now you can mention some of the details like so interrupting the teacher, walking around the classroom, or she's proud of them, happy face stickers, raising their hand. Those are details, examples that you can mention one or two, but you don't necessarily need to explain them so much. You need to focus on the most important part, which is showing how this example illustrates this definition that you guys have found. Okay, that's when you're explaining. So this is when you have psychology. As you can see, it's one example. It has two parts, maybe, and it's quite understandable. It has some, maybe not so formal register. It's like, okay, well, what happens? So I don't know, interrupt the teacher. When you have biology, it might be a bit harder because you may have some new words like names of animals, of plants, of redwood trees, galactonic acid, that kind of thing. But it's still the same. You got two examples. You need to show how it connects to the reading. And I would say as long as you guys are able to identify what the two examples are, then you're going to be more than fine because you can always find that relationship. And if you have any new words that you don't know how to spell, that you don't know how they are written, just make sure that you take notes on them. Don't just skip them So if you have two names of weird animals or weird plants, take notes however you want to write them down, and then try to repeat how they are pronounced, so pay attention. And okay, any questions so far about the listening part? Is it clear? All right. Now, if you take a look at the question is always going to be like this. Using the examples from the lecture, explain what behavior modification is and how it works. So using the example, explain the topic. As you can see, they are not asking you to directly summarize. It's not like summarize the reading and then summarize the lecture. No, they want you to explain the topic using the example. So that's why some people will say that it's a bit, maybe the hardest question in the speaking task, because you're asked to combine two elements to maybe show the connection that exists between them. But I wouldn't say so. I think it's just that you get the definition right, and then you focus on the important parts on the relevant info that you have in the lecture. So what you guys will do in your response is that first thing, remember that the listening is always way more important than the reading, which is why you need to spend more time talking about the reading and summarizing the lecture than you do with the reading, okay? So the listening is more important. What you need to have is first thing, a short intro. And in the introduction, you're gonna define the topic. So you're gonna mention what the topic is and its definition, what you have found in the reading. So according to the reading passage, behavior modification is when people change their behavior based on its consequences. Okay, that's it. Something short, 15 seconds, I would say, is the ideal time that you should spend there. And then you move on to the lecture. So you could say, in a lecture, the professor further illustrates this concept with the example of kids and how they behave in school. So first, some kids will misbehave and they will get punished for it. Now, on the other hand, when they behave well, they get rewarded with a happy face sticker or by the teacher telling them she's proud. Now that they know what the reaction of the teacher is or what the consequences of the behavior is, they will learn to act that way in class and they will start behaving well. So that's how kids modify their behavior based on the reaction that they get from the teacher, okay? Or modify the behavior in class based on the teacher's reaction. So that's what you need to do, okay? So first thing, the intro, the topic and the definition, and then you move on to the lecture. Try to show the connection, try to do something like, so kids change their behavior or their attitude in class based on the teacher's reaction, which are the consequences, or which is the consequence of all. Okay, so try to show how that's connected. You can always kind of repeat the definition later, but relating it to the example. Know what I mean? So you don't need a conclusion. Unless you have extra time, you don't have to do one. So in case you have more time, you don't know what to say, if you have a lot of time, like 10, 15 seconds, you can say something like, in short, that's how, I don't know, using the example of, or using this example, the professor demonstrates. Or if you have less time, you can just say, in short, that's how the professor illustrates it or demonstrates this concept. Okay, so that's only if you have extra time. Otherwise, not necessary. So everything okay now? Do you maybe have some questions for you to ask? Okay. So now, is there anybody who would like to try with the timer and everything? We have already discussed what this is about. You just need to put everything together, all the ideas that we have. Anyone? Okay, what about maybe Melanie? Would you mind?
Okay.
Okay. Please go.
According to the reading passage, behavior modification is the act when individual modify their behavior based on their actions, the consequences of their actions. In the lecture, the professor further illustrates this concept with the example of the kids on the class when they might get punished when they don't act like they don't act well, and the unpleasant consequences makes them behave and follow the rules for unpleasant consequences, and that's how they learn to that's how they learn based on the consequences of their actions.
Okay, nice. I like that closing sentence, that closing idea. That's how they learn based on how they originally behaved in class. It's really cool to use. Okay, I would say just remember, focus on those elements that we have found, you know? So misbehave, they get punished, they behave well, they get rewarded, and finally they learn. Okay, and timing was great. You did, your definition was awesome, 15 seconds exactly. So well done. Thank you so much, Melanie, for trying. Okay, guys. So any questions before we practice? We have some time to practice, so we can do some tasks. All right. So let's do a business topic. Okay. So here's the reading part. You guys will have 50 seconds to read. Remember, try to find the definition. Okay. Now let's listen to the lecture.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a marketing class. Nowadays, something you notice more and more is television commercials that are made specifically for certain television programs. So let's say a company wants to sell a cell phone. Now, during TV shows that young people watch, shows with pop music or teen serials, They create a commercial that emphasizes how fun the phone is. You know, the phone has bright colors, and they show kids having a good time with their friends. And, well, the company wants the kids watching TV at this time to want to buy this phone that's made especially for them. But the same company will make a different commercial to be shown during, say, a program about business or a business news show. Now, for this group of people, business people, the company will have to show how efficient their phone is, how it can handle all business easily, and maybe even save money. And here's the thing. It's basically the same phone. The company has just made two different commercials to appeal to different groups of people.
Using the professor's examples, explain the advertising technique of
Okay.
target marketing.
So you'll have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. All right, guys. So anyone wants to try? Give it a shot. What about maybe Daniela? Wanna go?
Okay,
Okay, go ahead.
so according to the reading passage, target marketing is about a strategy of advertise to small and specific audiences. In the lecture, the professor further illustrates this concept with the example of a company who tries to sell a cell phone to do different type of groups of people. First, they made a commercial who is based on teenagers' interests, and they made a different commercial for the interest of business people. So that's the way the professor explains how the target marketing works.
Okay, nice. Well done. I think that was really cool. So, okay, perfect. Okay, so you had your definition at the beginning. It was the right one, 15 seconds exactly, the strategy of advertising to specific audiences. And then I like how you introduced the example. So how you say the example of a company that tries to advertise a phone to two different, maybe you can check out some vocabulary, business vocabulary, for example, groups of people. Maybe you could say audience when we're talking about business. So to different audiences. And you use transition. So you said, when you have two examples, this is something you guys can do. So first, if they want to advertise it to a young audience, they will put it in commercials when young people are watching TV. And on the other hand, or second, I don't know, if they want to advertise it to business people, let's say, then they will put it in a time where business people are watching TV. So maybe when you have business TV shows or something like that. And it's the same phone, but two different commercials. So great, good organization. You focus on what's important, on how they advertise it. Careful with germs, maybe. So the strategy of advertising, right? Remember that whenever you have a preposition, like of, about, with, you need a gerund, advertising. So nice though, well done, good job. Okay, guys. Anybody else would like to try with this example, or you want me to change another? Anyone wants to go with this one? Okay, it would be nice to have one more. So maybe, Diego, what do you say? Wanna go?
Yeah, okay, Andrea.
Okay, so you can go.
According to the reading passage, there are two kinds of marketing, a general with radio and television, and specified about a target marketing that is a strategy that focuses on a specified audience. In the lecture, the professor further illustrate this concept with two commercial examples that a company create when they want to sell a cell phone. On one hand, they create a commercial about how the phone is and how to buy it for public in general. And on the other hand, they create a specified commercial of how can a company handle for all the business and save the money.
Hey, all right, nicely done. Way to go. So remember, if you have some extra time, maybe a conclusion will be great if you have some extra time. So like, or a closing idea, something like that. But well done in general. You have your definition. Careful, sometimes you will have that, in order to understand the main topic, they give you something else. But look at the question. It's only about target marketing, which is advertising to a specific audience. So they do mention something about the old technique of advertising to the public in general, but that's not what it's about, right? It's target marketing. So just focus on that one and the two examples. Advertising it to a young audience and a business people. Okay, Diego. Thank you. So let's do one more. What about this one here? Okay, so here's a reading, 50 seconds to read. Okay.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
Okay, so this comes up a lot when people make career decisions. A friend of mine from college always wanted to be a film reviewer. He was a film major and he loved movies. Most of all, he loved to write about movies. So when he graduated, he looked for a job as a film reviewer for a newspaper because, as a film reviewer, he'd get to see films for free and would be paid to write about them. That's what he loved. But he couldn't find a job as a film reviewer. So he took a position as a news reporter instead for a newspaper, investigating stories, writing about events, what news reporters do. Now, at first, my friend wasn't sure he'd be any good at this. He'd never been a news reporter before. But eventually, he adjusted and gained confidence, and he got used to the job. And he realized he was actually a pretty good reporter. Anyway, here's the thing. After a few years, the film reviewer for the newspaper where he worked quit, and my friend was offered her job. This was his dream, right? His opportunity to be a film reviewer had finally come, and the new job would actually pay more, too. But did he take the job? Nope, he turned it down. He told me he'd gotten used to being a news reporter, and he just didn't want to try something else. It seemed like too big of a change since, well, there was a chance that the new job might not work out.
Using the example from the lecture, explain the comfort zone bias.
30 seconds. Okay. So anyone wants to try this time? Maybe Araceli? Can we start with you?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, please go.
Okay, thank you. According to the reading passage, the comfort zone bias are familiar situations where we can have a natural preference. In the lecture, the man explains that a film reviewer that studied for that has a job like a news reporter, and then after years, he quit that job and tried to get a job like a film reviewer, but that big change doesn't work. So he preferred to be in his comfort zone bias.
Okay. All right, nice. So I like how you summarize the example personally. But careful with the definition. I don't know if it's just the familiar situations. It has to do with that, but I think it's the tendency. Okay, sorry. I think it's the tendency of remaining in familiar situations or in our comfort zone, right? So take careful with that. So this tendency, the tendency of, or the preference of remaining in comfortable familiar situations, that's the comfort zone bias. And I like how you illustrated that with the example. So you said, so it was too big of a change. He stayed in his comfort zone and decided not to take the job that he always wanted, right? So because of the comfort zone bias. So nice, focus on that. Careful with the tenses. This story was specifically in the past tense, but I like what you did. You can also use just a simple present to tell a story, but you need to make sure that every tense is the same. So everything is in the simple present. So he has a friend. His friend wanted to be a film reviewer. He has a film major, and then he doesn't get the job. He starts working as a news reporter, and when he gets the chance, he turns it down because he was too afraid of the risk. So everything in the simple present, but just the same tense. Don't mix it with the simple past. Okay. All right. Anybody else wants to try this one? Andrea, what about you? Do you want to go?
Okay.
Okay. So you can start.
Okay. According to the reading passage, comfort zone bias is when a person wants to stay in the comfort zone that's remaining with familiar to try to avoid to take risk. And in the lecture, the professor further illustrates this concept with example of a person who prepares for a for being a film reviewer, but he got a job like a new report, and he becomes pretty good in that. But then when the other person offers a job like a film reviewer, that was the dream that this person, he doesn't want to take it because he doesn't want to take the risk, because for him it's a big change.
Okay, nice, perfect. So good definition, remaining in our comfort zone. And I like how you summarize the example too. I think you guys have that ability. Nothing to say, maybe we can add some transitions. When you have that stories, those stories, that sequence of events, try to take advantage of that and use transitions. So first, he wants to be a film reviewer. He has a film major. I don't know, afterwards, he looks for a job as a film reviewer. However, he doesn't find one. Therefore, he starts working as a news reporter. Then he finally gets the chance to work as a film reviewer, which is what he always wanted, his dream job. Nevertheless, he turns it down since he was in his comfort zone, right? He was experiencing comfort zone bias. He didn't want to take the risk. So you see how you can use different transitions as you go. Try to check them out and try to use them.
Okay, thank you, Andrea.
Okay, guys. Do you maybe have some questions or some comments on this task? Yes, Araceli, sure.
Yes, I have a little question. In my definition, I said like the comfort zone bias is the familiar situation which we have a natural preference, and I don't know how have to say some different, or that is like fine because I say natural preference.
Okay, but you said familiar situations. What was it again? Familiar situations?
Which we have a natural preference.
Okay, so it would be great. Familiar situations which we have a natural preference, but you're missing maybe the word for. So that you can say we have a natural preference for familiar situations. In that case, it would make more sense. Because if you don't say it, it loses the meaning.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to say about the definition, vocabulary is going to be part of the rubric. No worries. Okay, so what I was saying, vocabulary is going to be part of the rubric, which means that you obviously need to use your own words, but don't worry too much about that when you're giving the definition. It's okay if you want to extract some words or use the same ones that you have here or a phrase, because it's going to be just like one portion of your response, right? Most of them is going to be your own explanation for the lecture. So if in the reading you want to extract a phrase from here, like maybe the tendency of remaining in comfortable, familiar situations rather than entering new ones, that's okay. It's not gonna really hurt your score as long as then in the lecture you use your own vocabulary. So it's okay if you want to extract some phrases or some words from here. Okay, guys, so any other question? Okay, guys. So then I'll be seeing you next week. Tomorrow you have practice session with Jasmani, and remember that Monday you'll also have class, right, to make up for the holiday. So please, before you go though, don't forget the daily survey. Have a nice night, you all.
Thank you, Andrea. Bye.
Bye-bye, you.
Thank you, Andrea. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Take care.